She thought a platinum medallion card gave her the right to act like a god. She thought her husband's last name was a get-out-of-jail-free card. But at 35,000 feet, there is nowhere to run. When Vanessa Van Doren demanded that the suspicious family in row 1 be removed for her comfort, she didn't just delay a flight. She signed her own social death warrant. She screamed for the manager, but she forgot one crucial rule of high-altitude business. Never insult the man whose name is painted on the tail of the plane. This is the story of the flight that changed everything. The air inside the Centurion Lounge at JFK International Airport was usually a sanctuary of hushed conversations and the clinking of crystal glassware. It was a place designed to smell like expensive leather and old money. But today, it smelled like expensive perfume and unbridled rage. Vanessa Van Doren stood at the concierge desk, her knuckles white as she gripped the marble countertop. She was a woman who wore her wealth like armor, a vintage Chanel blazer, a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the fluorescent light, and a facial expression that suggested she smelled something rotting. "I don't think you heard me the first time," Vanessa hissed, her voice loud enough to turn heads 3 tables away. "I specifically requested the private alcove near the window, the one with the view of the tarmac, and now you're telling me it's occupied." The concierge, a young man named Liam, who had been trained to handle warlords and temperamental divas with equal grace, forced a smile. "I apologize, Mrs. Van Doren. We are at full capacity this morning due to the weather delays in Chicago. The family currently in the alcove arrived an hour ago." Vanessa whipped her head around, her blonde bob slicing the air. She narrowed her eyes at the alcove in question. It was the prime spot, secluded by frosted glass dividers. Inside, she could see a family of 3. A black man, broad-shouldered and dressed in a comfortable, nondescript navy tracksuit, was laughing softly at something on his tablet. Beside him, a woman with elegant braids and a cashmere wrap was helping a young girl, maybe 7 years old, color in a sketchbook. They looked peaceful. They looked happy. And to Vanessa, they looked like they didn't belong. "Them?" Vanessa scoffed, turning back to Liam, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, ugly whisper. "You gave the VIP alcove to them. Are we running a charity shelter now? I pay 6 figures a year on my Amex. I expect standards, Liam." "That family is also waiting for the flight to Zurich, Mrs. Van Doren," Liam said, his tone stiffening just a fraction. "They are guests of the airline." "Guests," she repeated, rolling her eyes. "Employees using non-revenue passes, no doubt. Probably a pilot's cousin or a affirmative action diversity hire using up a favor. Listen to me. Go over there and tell them there has been a mistake. Tell them that space is reserved for paying members." "I cannot do that, ma'am." Vanessa slammed her hand on the counter. The sound echoed, silencing the nearby bar area. "Do you know who my husband is? Richard Van Doren. Van Doren Pharmaceuticals. If I make one phone call, you won't just be fired, you'll be unhireable in this city." Liam didn't blink, though his jaw tightened. "The alcove is taken." Vanessa grabbed her Louis Vuitton carry-on, her nails digging into the leather. "Fine, I'll handle it myself." She marched across the lounge, her heels clicking like gunshots on the polished floor. She didn't approach the alcove with a polite cough or a gentle wave. She simply walked up to the frosted glass partition and loomed over the table. The man in the tracksuit looked up. He had kind eyes, deep and observant, surrounded by laugh lines. He paused the video on his tablet and removed one earbud. "Can we help you?" he asked, his voice a deep baritone, calm and level. "You're in my seat," Vanessa stated, crossing her arms. The woman beside him looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" "This alcove," Vanessa gestured vaguely with a manicured hand. "It's for high-priority members. I fly this route twice a month. This is where I sit. I assume the staff put you here because they didn't know I was coming. But I'm here now. So if you could just gather your things and move to the general seating area, That would be great. She looked at the little girl's colouring book spread out on the table and wrinkled her nose. And clean up this mess. It looks like a daycare in here. The man, whose name Vanessa didn't care to know, slowly placed his tablet on the table. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. I wasn't aware the furniture had names on it. I don't see Van Doren etched into the leather. Vanessa's face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. It's about hierarchy. Look, I'm sure you're enjoying your little free upgrade or whatever employee perk got you in here, but some of us actually pay for the lifestyle you're renting. Don't make this difficult. Security is very friendly with me. The woman, Angela, placed a calming hand on her husband's arm. Davies, she said softly, it's not worth it. We board in 20 minutes. Davies looked at his wife, then back at Vanessa. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're right, honey. He looked Vanessa up and down, analysing her like a balance sheet that didn't add up. Ma'am, there are plenty of seats by the bar. I suggest you find one before you embarrass yourself further. Vanessa gasped. Embarrass myself? You listen to me. Flight 494 to Zurich. Boarding now for first class and group 1, the intercom announced, cutting her off. Davies stood up. He was taller than he looked sitting down, well over 6 feet. He towered over Vanessa. He began packing up the crayons with a gentle efficiency. Come on, Maya. Time to go. Vanessa stood frozen as the family gathered their belongings and walked past her. As Davies passed, he didn't even look at her. It was that dismissal, that absolute lack of deference, that lit the fuse of a bomb that would explode 30,000 feet in the air. She pulled out her phone and dialed her husband's assistant. It's Vanessa. Get me the number for the airline's corporate liaison. Now, I want to file a formal complaint about the screening process in the JFK lounge. They're letting absolute riffraff in. She hung up and followed them to the gate, her eyes burning holes into their backs. She promised herself one thing. They would not be comfortable on this flight. Not if she had anything to say about it. The gate area for Flight 494 was chaotic, but the first-class lane was a red carpet of exclusivity. Vanessa bypassed the huddled masses in economy, holding her boarding pass like a weapon. She scanned the crowd and spotted the family again. They were at the front of the priority line, chatting with the gate agent. The agent was laughing at something the little girl, Maya, had said. Unbelievable, Vanessa thought. They're charming the staff. Typical con artist behavior. She stepped up behind them, practically breathing down Davies's neck. She wanted them to feel her presence. She wanted them to know she hadn't forgotten the lounge. When the agent waved them through, Vanessa stepped up immediately. Vanessa Van Doren, she announced, slapping her passport onto the scanner. Seat 2A. The agent's smile faltered slightly as she processed the change in energy. Welcome back, Mrs. Van Doren. Enjoy your flight. Vanessa snatched the passport back. I intend to, assuming the cabin isn't a zoo. She marched down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel felt refreshing, but her blood was boiling hot. She entered the aircraft, a Boeing 777 outfitted with the new flagship first-class suites. These weren't just seats. They were individual pods with sliding doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch screens. She turned left, and then she stopped dead. In seat 1A, the most prestigious spot on the plane, the bulkhead suite with the extra legroom, sat the man from the lounge. In seat 1B, right next to him, was his wife, and in 1K, across the aisle, was the little girl. They occupied the entire front row, the owner's row. Vanessa looked at her boarding pass. 2A. She was directly behind the man. This cannot be happening, she muttered. She slammed her carry-on into the overhead bin with enough force to shake the frame. A flight attendant, a poised woman named Camilla with immaculate red lipstick and a gold name tag, materialized instantly. Mrs. Van Doren, is everything all right? Let me help you with that. No, it is not all right, Vanessa snapped, pointing a manicured finger at the back of Davies's head. Why are they in row 1? Camilla blinked, confused. I'm sorry? Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery? They are passengers, just like you. Montgomery? Vanessa tested the name. It sounded generic, unimportant. Listen to me. I specifically request the bulkhead on every flight. I have claustrophobia. I need the extra space. There has obviously been a booking error. You need to move them. Camilla's expression tightened into professional politeness. I'm afraid that's impossible, ma'am. The flight is fully booked. Row 1 is occupied. Check their tickets, Vanessa demanded, her voice rising. The other first-class passengers, a tech CEO in 2K and an older socialite in 3A, were starting to watch. I bet you anything they're upgrades. Look at how they're dressed. Tracksuits in first class? It's disgraceful. If they are upgrades, you can bump them back to business or economy to accommodate a full-fare paying customer. Davies didn't turn around. He simply put on his noise-cancelling headphones. This infuriated Vanessa more than if he had screamed at her. He was ignoring her. Mrs. Van Doren, Camilla said, her voice lowering to a soothing octave meant for unruly toddlers. Mr. Montgomery paid for his ticket. I cannot move a passenger from their assigned seat simply because you want it. Please, take your seat so we can finish boarding. Vanessa glared at Camilla. You're new, aren't you? You obviously don't know how this works. I don't sit in row 2. I sit in row 1. Today you're in 2A, Camilla said firmly. Vanessa huffed and finally sat down, but she didn't buckle her belt. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously, likely a scathing email to the airline's CEO, whom she had met once at a charity gala 5 years ago. As the plane continued to board, the atmosphere in the front cabin grew heavy. The little girl, Maya, stood up in her seat to wave at her dad across the aisle. "Daddy, look! The screen has games!" she squealed in delight. It was a happy, innocent sound. To Vanessa, it was a war cry. "Excuse me!" "Done!" Vanessa shouted, leaning forward to tap aggressively on Davies's shoulder. Davies slid his headphones off slowly. He turned his head, his face impassive. "Yes?" "Control your child," Vanessa spat. "This is first class, not a playground. Some of us are trying to work. If I hear one more screech from that girl, I'm calling the flight attendant back here." Davies looked at Maya, who had frozen, her eyes wide with fear. He looked back at Vanessa, his eyes hardening. The warmth was gone. Now he looked like a glacier, cold, hard, and capable of crushing things. "She's excited," Davies said quietly. "It's her birthday. She's 7. She isn't screaming. She's happy. Perhaps you should try it sometime." "Don't patronize me," Vanessa hissed. "You think because you scrape together enough miles for a ticket you belong here. You don't. You're disrupting the atmosphere." "The only disruption here," Davies said, turning his body fully to face her, "is you. Now, I'm going to put my headphones back on. If you touch me again, or if you yell at my daughter again, we're going to have a very different conversation. Do you understand?" There was an authority in his voice that made Vanessa pause for a split second. It wasn't the bluster of a bully. It was the calm certainty of a man who held power he hadn't bothered to use yet. But Vanessa Van Doren didn't recognize quiet power. She only recognized loud power, and she took his warning as a threat. "Is that a threat?" she gasped loudly, looking around for witnesses. "Did you hear that? He just threatened me." The man in 2K buried his face in his Financial Times, refusing to make eye contact. Camilla rushed back over. "What is going on?" "He threatened me." Vanessa pointed an accusatory finger. "He said if I spoke again, there would be consequences. I don't feel safe. I want him off this plane. Now." Davies sighed, a long, weary exhalation. He looked at Camilla. "I asked her politely not to yell at my 7-year-old daughter on her birthday. That's all." Camilla looked between them. She saw a calm family and a frantic, red-faced woman. "Mrs. Van Doren, the aircraft doors are about to close. I need you to lower your voice." I will not lower my voice until this thug is removed, Vanessa shrieked. I demand to speak to the captain. The entire cabin went silent. Even the economy passengers filing past looked into the first-class cabin, wide-eyed. I can take you to the galley to speak with the lead purser, Camilla offered. No, Vanessa said, unbuckling her seatbelt and standing up. I'm not going to the galley. I'm going to the cockpit. If you won't protect your premium passengers, I'll find someone who will. She stepped into the aisle, blocking the boarding path. Davies watched her go, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black metal phone. Not a standard smartphone, but a specialized satellite device, often used by top-tier executives for secure communications. He typed a single message, problem on flight 494, seat 2A, interference with crew, let Harrison know. He hit send, then looked over at his wife. It's going to be a long flight, Angie. She has no idea, does she? Angela whispered. Not a clue, Davies replied, but she's about to find out. The atmosphere inside the Boeing 777 transformed instantly from the quiet hum of boarding to the sharp tension of a crime scene. Vanessa Van Doren stood in the aisle separating the galley from the first-class cabin, a one-woman blockade against operational efficiency. Economy passengers, shuffling past with their overstuffed backpacks, slowed down to gawk at the woman in the Chanel blazer, screaming about thugs in first class. Camilla, the flight attendant, was losing her professional veneer. Beads of sweat broke through her foundation. Mrs. Van Doren, you're blocking the boarding process. You are actively violating federal aviation regulations. I need you to sit down now. I don't care about your regulations, Vanessa shouted, her voice cracking with hysteria. I feel unsafe. That man threatened my life because I asked his brat to be quiet. I am a Platinum Medallion member. My husband is Richard Van Doren, and I demand you remove that family before we push back. In seat 1A, Davies remained an island of calm in the hurricane Vanessa had created. He hadn't put his headphones back on. He was watching Vanessa with a clinical detachment, almost like a scientist, observing a particularly aggressive specimen of bacteria in a petri dish. His wife, Angela, had pulled Maya close, shielding the little girl's eyes from the ugly display. The commotion grew too loud to ignore in the cockpit. The flight deck door opened, and the first officer, a sharp-looking man in his late 20s, stepped out. He took one look at the red-faced Vanessa and the growing line of exasperated passengers in the jet bridge and groaned internally. What is the problem back here? The first officer demanded, his voice projecting authority. Vanessa spun on him, relieved to see a man in a uniform, someone she assumed would understand the natural order of things. Finally, officer, these crew members are incompetent. I am Vanessa Van Doren. The man in 1A threatened me. I want him off this plane. He is a security risk. The first officer looked past her to Davies. Davies met his gaze and offered a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The first officer blinked. He seemed to do a double take, his posture straightening even further. He looked back at Vanessa, his expression hardening. Ma'am, did you say the gentleman in 1A threatened you? Yes. He said if I spoke to his daughter again, there would be consequences. That is a direct threat. The first officer looked at Camilla. Did you hear a threat? Camilla shook her head vigorously. No, sir. Mr. Montgomery asked her not to yell at his child. Mrs. Van Doren escalated the situation. Vanessa gasped. You liar! You're protecting him. Why? Because you're afraid of him? Don't worry. When my husband hears about this, you'll be serving coffee in a roadside diner by next week. The cockpit door opened wider, and Captain James Sterling emerged. He was a legend in the airline, a silver-haired pilot with 30 years of experience and the patience of a saint, usually. He put a hand on his first officer's shoulder. Enough. Captain Sterling's voice was low, gravelly, and brooked no argument. He looked at Vanessa over his reading glasses. Madam, I am Captain Sterling. Under FAA regulations, I have the final say on who flies on my aircraft. Right now, the only person disrupting this flight and causing a security concern is you." Vanessa looked as if she had been slapped. "Me? Captain, you are making a grave mistake. You obviously don't know who I am, or who that man is." Captain Sterling shifted his gaze to row 1. His eyes widened slightly as he truly registered the face of the man in 1A. The recognition was instant, and it was accompanied by a flash of deep respect, perhaps even a touch of fear. "Mr. Montgomery," Captain Sterling said, his tone shifting from authoritative to deferential, "I apologize for this disturbance. Are you and your family all right?" Vanessa's jaw dropped. "You're apologizing to him?" Davies smiled, a genuine, easy smile. "We're fine, Captain Sterling. Good to see you again. How's the new turbulence avoidance system working out on this airframe?" "It's smooth as silk, sir," the captain replied, ignoring Vanessa completely. Vanessa couldn't process what she was seeing. The pilot was chatting with the thug about aircraft systems. "Captain!" Vanessa shrieked, grabbing his sleeve. "Stop ignoring me. I am the victim here. I demand you call the police to escort him off." Captain Sterling slowly removed her hand from his arm. His eyes were ice cold. "Mrs. Van Doren, you have 2 choices. You take your assigned seat in 2A, stay quiet, and follow crew instructions, or I have airport security remove you from the terminal. We are already 20 minutes past our pushback time because of this tantrum. Choose, now." Vanessa looked around the cabin. Every face was staring at her with open hostility. Even the tech CEO in 2K was shaking his head in disgust. She was cornered. But her ego wouldn't let her back down completely. "Fine," she spat, smoothing her blazer with trembling hands. "I will sit. But mark my words, Captain Sterling. This is the last flight you will ever command. I will own this airline by the time we land." She threw herself into seat 2A, fuming. Captain Sterling looked at Davies one last time. Davies just gave a small shrug, as if to say, "Some people, right?" The captain returned to the cockpit. Camilla managed to get the rest of the passengers boarded in record time. The doors closed. The aircraft pushed back, 45 minutes late, carrying a pressurized cabin full of resentment. As they taxied to the runway, Vanessa pulled out her phone before airplane mode was enforced. She sent a text to her husband. "Emergency. Riffraff in first class threatened me. Crew incompetent. Captain rude. Get legal ready. I want heads to roll when we land in Zurich." Up in 1A, Davies was also sending a final text on his secure satellite phone. It went to a man named Harrison, the chief operating officer of the airline's parent company globally. The message read, "We are airborne. 45 late. The Van Doren woman in 2A is still active. Let the ground team in Zurich know to expect a VIP reception for her. Let's show her what real ownership looks like." The climb to cruising altitude was tense. The seatbelt sign remained on longer than usual as they navigated some chop over the Atlantic, which did nothing to improve Vanessa Van Doren's mood. She sat in 2A, stewing in a toxic brew of humiliation and rage. Every time she looked forward, all she could see was the back of Davies Montgomery's head in the seat that should have been hers. She could hear the faint murmurs of the family talking, the occasional soft giggle from the little girl. It grated on her nerves like sandpaper. They were comfortable, they were happy, and they had made her look like a fool. The moment the chime sounded, indicating they had reached 35,000 feet, and the seatbelt sign flicked off, Vanessa unbuckled. She needed a drink. She needed to assert dominance. Camilla appeared with the drinks cart, her smile brittle. Beverage, Mrs. Van Doren. Vodka martini. Very dry. 3 olives. "And bring it fast," Vanessa commanded, not making eye contact. She was too busy staring at the gap between the seats in front of her. Davies had his tray table down. He was working on a laptop now, but beside it sat that strange, thick black phone she had seen earlier. It didn't look like an iPhone or a Samsung. It had a small, stubby antenna and several blinking LED lights along the side. Vanessa's mind, already poisoned by prejudice and anger, latched onto the device. It looked military. It looked dangerous. Aha, she thought. Got him! When Camilla returned with the martini, Vanessa didn't take it. Instead, she leaned in close to the flight attendant, her eyes wide with feigned terror. "Camilla," she whispered loudly, "look at what he has." Camilla followed her gaze. "The laptop? No, you idiot. The device next to it. The black box with the lights." Vanessa's voice rose in pitch. "It's transmitting something. I saw him using it on the ground when the doors were open, and he's using it now." Mrs. Van Doren, many business travelers have specialized equipment. "That's not business equipment," Vanessa shouted, abandoning the whisper entirely. She stood up, pointing accusingly over Davies's shoulder. "That looks like a detonator, or some kind of jamming device. He's going to bring down the plane." The reaction was instantaneous. The socialite in 3A dropped her champagne flute. The tech CEO in 2K ripped off his headphones, eyes wide. Murmurs of alarm rippled back into the economy cabin. In a post-9/11 world, words like detonator, screamed on an airplane, were enough to incite panic. Angela grabbed Maya's hand tightly. Davies slowly closed his laptop lid. He didn't turn around. He just sighed, a deep sound of profound exhaustion. Camilla was pale. "Mrs. Van Doren, please sit down. You cannot say things like that. I'm trying to save our lives." Vanessa shrieked, feeling the rush of power as other passengers looked at her with fear, and then at Davies with suspicion. "Look at it. He threatened me on the ground, and now he has a strange device. Connect the dots. Captain Sterling is too busy kissing up to him to see the threat." Camilla had no choice. The accusation was too serious to ignore. She stepped around Vanessa to row one. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Montgomery." "Sir?" Davies turned. His expression was grave, but not angry. He looked disappointed. "Yes, Camilla?" "Sir, I'm very sorry, but another passenger has raised a security concern regarding your electronic device. The black one." Davies picked up the satellite phone. "This?" Vanessa scrambled backward into the aisle, bumping into the bulkhead. "Don't touch it. He's going to trigger it." Davies looked past Camilla to Vanessa, his eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Van Doren, you have crossed a line from nuisance to actionable defamation and inciting panic. This is a SATCOM Global 8000 secure satellite link. It's used for encrypted corporate communication when flying over oceans where standard Wi-Fi is unreliable." "Liar!" Vanessa yelled. "Prove it. Hand it over to the crew." "I can't do that," Davies said calmly. "It's biometrically locked to my print, and the information on it is classified corporate data." "See!" Vanessa crowed, looking triumphantly at the terrified passengers behind her. "He refuses to hand it over. He's hiding something. We need to divert this plane. I demand we land immediately." The cabin was on a knife's edge. Panic was starting to set in. Suddenly, the cabin intercom chimed 3 times, a specific code that made Camilla stand up straighter. The lead purser, a stern woman named Beatrix, who had been preparing the meal service in the galley, stepped out, holding a telephone handset connected to the cockpit. Beatrix didn't look at Vanessa. She walked straight to Camilla. They whispered for a moment, Beatrix's face grim. Camilla nodded, her eyes widening as she listened. She glanced over at Vanessa, and for the first time, her expression wasn't one of annoyance or fear, but of pity. Beatrix hung up the interphone and approached row 1. She ignored Vanessa entirely. "Mr. Montgomery," Beatrix said, her voice smooth and incredibly polite, audible to the entire silent cabin. "Captain Sterling sends his regards. We just received an ACR's priority message from headquarters in Atlanta, specifically from Mr. Harrison's office." At the mention of Harrison, Vanessa frowned. That was the name of the CEO of the parent company that owned this airline. Beatrix continued. "They received your message regarding the situation on board. They have instructed us to inform you that the ground team in Zurich has been mobilized as per your request. Furthermore, Captain Sterling wanted you to know that he has authorized the disabling of the Seat 2A in-flight entertainment system and has cut off alcohol service to that row for the remainder of the flight, citing unruly behavior. Vanessa sputtered. What? You can't do that. I'm Vanessa Van Doren. Beatrix finally turned to face her. The purser's smile was terrifyingly professional. Mrs. Van Doren, the captain is the supreme authority on this vessel. His orders are final. Furthermore, the message from headquarters indicated that they are very sorry your flight experience is not living up to your standards. Beatrix paused, letting the silence stretch. They also wished to remind all passengers, Beatrix said, raising her voice slightly so the whole cabin could hear, that this new Boeing 777, along with 50 others in our fleet, was purchased 2 years ago through a private equity acquisition led by Montgomery Global Holdings. Beatrix turned back to Davies and gave a small bow. Thank you for flying with us today, Mr. Montgomery. If you or your family need anything else, anything at all, to make the flight more comfortable while you inspect your asset, please let me know. The silence that fell over the cabin was heavier than lead. Every eye shifted from Davies to Vanessa. Vanessa stared at the purser, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. She looked at the man in the tracksuit, the riffraff, the thug. Montgomery Global Holdings, the private equity firm that had bought out the airline's parent company in a hostile takeover 2 years ago. It was all over the financial news. Her husband had complained about it for weeks because his stock portfolio took a hit. The man sitting in front of her wasn't just a passenger. He wasn't just a VIP. He owned the plane. He owned the airline. In a very real sense, at 35,000 feet, he owned her. The remaining 5 hours of Flight 494 were a masterclass in psychological isolation. For Vanessa Van Doren, the first-class cabin, usually her stage, her throne room, had transformed into a glass cage. The revelation that Davies Montgomery wasn't just a wealthy passenger, but the owner of the very metal tube hurtling them through the stratosphere had sucked the oxygen out of her lungs. She slumped in Seat 2A, the silence ringing in her ears. The in-flight entertainment screen in front of her was black, disabled by the crew as promised. No movies to distract her, no flight map to track the time. Just the dark reflection of her own terrified face staring back. She looked around for allies, but the social dynamics of the cabin had shifted violently. The tech CEO in 2K, who had previously been burying himself in newspapers to avoid the drama, was now leaning across the aisle, engaging Davies in conversation. "Mr. Montgomery," the CEO said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet cabin. "I just wanted to say, the turnaround you did with the logistics division last quarter was brilliant. I've been following the merger. Bold moves." Davies smiled, sipping a glass of vintage Dom Perignon that Beatrix had personally poured for him. "Thank you. It's all about the people. If you treat the staff well, the logistics handle themselves." He said it loudly enough for Vanessa to hear. It was a dagger wrapped in velvet. Vanessa shrank lower in her seat. Every laugh from the front row, every clink of silverware felt like a judgment. She watched as Beatrix brought out a special dessert for Maya, a chocolate sundae with a sparkler stuck in the top. The crew gathered around to sing "Happy Birthday" in hushed, respectful tones. Davies looked back just once. His eyes met Vanessa's. He didn't sneer. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at her with a profound, terrifying indifference. It was the look a lion gives a fly before swatting it, or ignoring it entirely, because it's not worth the energy. Desperation began to claw at Vanessa's throat. She needed to fix this. She needed to spin the narrative before they landed. If Davies Montgomery really was who they said he was, he could ruin her socially. He could ruin Richard. She pressed the call button. Once, twice, 3 times. 5 minutes passed. Finally Camilla appeared. The warmth was gone from the flight attendant's face, replaced by a rigid, icy professionalism that was far more intimidating than anger. "Yes, Mrs. Van Doren?" "I need to speak to him," Vanessa whispered, gesturing weakly toward seat 1A. "Mr. Montgomery is resting," Camilla said, her voice flat. "Please," Vanessa pleaded, her voice trembling. I didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. My blood sugar was low. If I could just apologize. Mr. Montgomery has requested not to be disturbed by you for the duration of the flight, Camilla interrupted. The captain has also instructed that you are to remain in your seat. If you attempt to approach row 1 again, we will have to restrain you. Do you understand? Restrain her? Like a criminal? Vanessa felt tears prick her eyes. Tears of self-pity, not remorse. "I just want a glass of water," she choked out. "I will bring you a bottle," Camilla said. She turned and walked away without waiting for a thank you. The rest of the flight blurred into a nightmare of paranoia. Vanessa sat in the dry, recycled air, her mind racing. What did VIP reception mean? Surely they wouldn't arrest her. She hadn't hit anyone. She had just voiced safety concerns. Yes, that was it. She was a vigilant citizen. She would tell the authorities she was simply being cautious in a post-9/11 world. They would understand. They would side with her. She clung to that delusion as the plane began its descent over the Swiss Alps. The jagged, snow-capped peaks rose up to meet them, beautiful and unforgiving. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing," Captain Sterling's voice boomed. As the wheels touched down on the tarmac at Zurich Airport, a ripple of applause broke out in the cabin. A rare occurrence on international flights these days, but they weren't clapping for the landing. They were clapping because the ordeal was over. Vanessa unbuckled her belt the second the ding sounded, desperate to grab her bag and flee. She needed to be the first one off. She needed to disappear into the anonymity of the terminal before Montgomery could make a move. But as the plane taxied to the gate, a new announcement came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Sterling. We have arrived in Zurich. We ask that all passengers remain seated with their seatbelts fastened. Police authorities will be boarding the aircraft to escort a passenger off before general deplaning commences. Thank you for your patience." Vanessa's blood ran cold. Police. She looked at the window. Below, on the tarmac, 3 black Mercedes vans were waiting next to the jet bridge. Flashing blue lights bounced off the fuselage. 2 uniformed Kantonspolizei, Swiss cantonal police, officers stood at the bottom of the stairs, their faces grim. "It's for him," Vanessa whispered to herself, a frantic mantra. "It has to be for him. He has the device. He's the security risk." The seatbelt sign stayed on. The cabin was deathly silent. The forward door opened. The cool, crisp Swiss air rushed in, smelling of jet fuel and rain. 2 police officers boarded the plane. They were large men, efficient and unsmiling. They spoke briefly to Beatrix, who nodded and pointed directly at seat 2A. Vanessa stopped breathing. The officers walked past Davies Montgomery without even glancing at him. They walked past the tech CEO. They stopped at row 2. "Vanessa Van Doren?" the lead officer asked. His English was heavily accented but perfectly clear. Yes?" she squeaked. "Please take your belongings and come with us." "Why?" she demanded, though the fight was draining out of her. "I haven't done anything. That man," she pointed a shaking finger at Davis's back, "he's the one you want." The officer didn't look at Davis. He reached down and firmly took Vanessa's elbow. "Ma'am, you are being detained for interfering with a flight crew, creating a security disturbance, and intimidation of passengers. Under Swiss aviation law, the captain has requested your removal. Stand up." "You can't do this," she screamed, the hysteria returning. "My husband is Richard Van Doren. I am an American citizen." "You can call your husband from the station," the officer said, pulling her up. As she was marched down the aisle, humiliated, Vanessa looked desperately at the other passengers for sympathy. She saw none. The socialite in 3A was filming her on an iPhone. The tech CEO shook his head, and then she passed row 1. Davies Montgomery was standing now, putting his coat on. He turned to face her. "Mrs. Van Doren," he said softly. Vanessa stopped, the officer's grip tight on her arm. She looked at him, waiting for him to mock her. "I hope you learn something from this," Davies said, his voice devoid of malice, which made it worse. "Money buys comfort. It doesn't buy class, and it certainly doesn't buy the right to treat people like dirt. You ruined my life," she hissed. "No," Davies replied, turning back to his daughter. "You did that all by yourself." The officers shoved her forward. She stumbled out onto the jet bridge, the bright lights of the terminal blinding her, into the waiting arms of a very different kind of reception than she was used to. The holding room at Zurich airport was a stark contrast to the Centurion lounge. It was a windowless box with cinder block walls painted a depressing shade of institutional grey. There was no champagne, no plush leather, only a metal table bolted to the floor and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped insect. Vanessa had been sitting there for 3 hours. They had taken her phone. They had taken her passport. They had taken her dignity. She had demanded a lawyer. She had demanded the American embassy. She had demanded water. They had given her a plastic cup of lukewarm tap water and told her to wait. Finally, the heavy steel door opened. A woman in a sharp grey suit walked in. She didn't look like a police officer. She looked like a corporate executioner. She carried a leather portfolio and had the weary expression of someone who cleaned up expensive messes for a living. "Mrs. Van Doren," the woman said, sitting opposite her. "I am Lena Fisher. I am the legal representative for the airline here in Zurich." "Finally," Vanessa exclaimed. "You people are going to pay for this. I want to sue. I want to sue the captain, the crew, and especially that man, Davies Montgomery. I was profiled. I was harassed." Lena Fisher opened her portfolio and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Mrs. Van Doren, I advise you to stop talking. Every word you say is being recorded and can be used in the criminal proceedings against you." "Criminal?" Vanessa laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Don't be ridiculous. I raised a voice. That's not a crime. Interfering with the duties of a flight crew is a federal offense in the United States and a serious crime in Switzerland," Lena said calmly. "However, I am not here to discuss your criminal charges. That is for the Polizei. I am here to deliver this." Vanessa looked at the paper. It was a letter on the airline's heavy, cream-colored stationery. Notice of lifetime ban. "Effective immediately," Lena read. "You are banned from flying on this airline, as well as our partner carriers, for life. Your frequent flyer account, including your platinum medallion status, has been terminated. Your accrued miles, all 2 million of them, have been forfeited." "You can't do that," Vanessa gasped. "Those miles are worth thousands of dollars." "Read the terms of carriage," Lena said. "Abusive behavior voids the contract. Furthermore, because of the severity of the incident, specifically the false accusation regarding an explosive device, your name has been added to the internal no-fly list shared by the Global Airline Alliance. You will find it very difficult to fly on any major carrier out of Europe or the US for the foreseeable future." Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. "But how do I get home?" "That is not our concern," Lena said, closing the folder. "I suggest a boat." "Wait," Vanessa stammered. "My husband. I need to call Richard. He'll fix this. He knows people." Lena paused at the door. She looked at Vanessa with a strange expression, almost amused. "Ah, yes, Mr. Van Doren. We contacted him 3 hours ago to inform him of your detention." "And?" Vanessa asked, hope surging. "Is he sending the corporate jet?" "Not exactly," Lena said. "Mr. Van Doren had a very interesting conversation with Mr. Harrison, the COO of our parent company. It seems Mr. Montgomery's firm, Montgomery Global Holdings, is the majority shareholder in the pharmaceutical supply chain logistics company that your husband uses to ship his products to Europe." Vanessa felt sick. The web was tighter than she thought. "Mr. Harrison informed your husband that due to the security risks associated with the Van Doren name, Montgomery Global Holdings might have to review their contracts with Van Doren Pharmaceuticals. They wouldn't want to be associated with volatile elements. Vanessa slumped back in her chair. Oh my God. Your husband, Lena continued, twisting the knife, was quite expressive. He told us that he would not be coming to Zurich. He said you created this mess, and you can pay for your own lawyer. He also mentioned something about freezing the joint accounts until he can assess the damage to his stock price. Lena opened the door. The police will be in shortly to process your bail. Good luck, Mrs. Van Doren. It's a long swim back to New York. The door clanged shut. Vanessa Van Doren was alone, truly alone. The silence of the holding cell was absolute, but in her head she could still hear the sound of the little girl, Maya, laughing in seat 1K. She could hear Davies Montgomery's calm voice, "Money doesn't buy class." She put her head in her hands, and for the first time in 20 years she cried. Not because she was sorry, but because she realized her currency, her husband's name, her status, her arrogance, was now worthless. She had tried to get a black family removed from a plane, only to find out that they owned the sky, and she had just fallen out of it. 6 months had passed since Flight 494 touched down in Zurich, but for Vanessa Van Doren, time had stopped the moment the police escorted her off that plane. The world, however, had moved on at breakneck speed. The video recorded by the socialite in seat 3A, a grainy but audibly crisp clip of Vanessa screaming about detonators and riffraff, had not just gone viral. It had become a cultural artifact. It had been viewed 45 million times on TikTok, dubbed with remixes, and dissected by body language experts on YouTube. Vanessa wasn't just a woman who made a scene. She was the global face of entitlement. New York City, 6 months later. The rain in Queens was different from the rain in the Upper East Side. In the Upper East Side, doormen with umbrellas shielded you from the drizzle. In Queens, waiting for the Q60 bus, the rain just soaked you to the bone. Vanessa adjusted her hood, keeping her head down. She wasn't wearing Chanel anymore. The blazer had been sold to a consignment shop 3 months ago to pay legal fees. She wore a generic beige raincoat she'd bought at Target. She wore oversized sunglasses, even in the rain, hoping no one would recognize her. But they usually did. "Hey," a teenager standing next to her at the bus stop nudged his friend. "Isn't that the plane lady? The one who got owned by the billionaire?" Vanessa turned away, staring intently at a puddle, her heart hammered against her ribs. This was her life now. The fallout had been nuclear. 2 days after the incident, Richard Van Doren had filed for divorce. It wasn't a sorrowful parting. It was a strategic amputation. The board of directors at Van Doren Pharmaceuticals had given him an ultimatum: cut ties with his volatile wife or step down as CEO. Richard, a man who loved power far more than he loved Vanessa, had made his choice before the ink on her arrest warrant was dry. The prenup was ironclad. Vanessa got a small settlement, enough to survive, but not enough to maintain her lifestyle. She was exiled from the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, and the social circle that had once been her entire world. Her friends had ghosted her instantly. No one wanted to be seen lunching with the woman who had tried to racially profile Davies Montgomery. The bus hissed to a stop, splashing dirty water onto her shoes. Vanessa climbed on, fumbling for her Metro card. It was empty. "Insufficient fare," the machine beeped loudly. "Move it along, lady," the driver grunted. I have change," Vanessa stammered, digging through her purse. "Just get in the back," the driver sighed, waving her through with pity. She sat in the back of the bus, clutching her bag. She pulled out her phone, an older model now, as her data plan had been downgraded. She opened LinkedIn, looking for job postings. She had applied to be an event planner, a receptionist, even a sales associate at high-end boutiques. But every time they Googled her name, the interview ended. The no-fly list ban was still active, making her unemployable for any job that required travel. But the social stigma was the real prison. She scrolled past a newsfeed item that made her freeze. Montgomery Global Holdings announces record profits and new aviation scholarship. She clicked the link, her fingers trembling. There was a photo of him, Davies Montgomery. He was standing on a tarmac, cutting a ribbon in front of a new Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Beside him was his wife, Angela, looking radiant in a blue dress, and their daughter, Maya, now a little taller, holding a giant pair of scissors. The article read, Davies Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Global, announced today the launch of the Horizon Initiative, a scholarship program designed to help underprivileged youth from inner-city backgrounds attend flight school. The program aims to diversify the aviation industry. When asked about the inspiration for the program, the article continued, Mr. Montgomery cited a memorable flight to Zurich earlier this year. I was reminded that the sky belongs to everyone, Montgomery said, and sometimes you have to clear the turbulence to see the view. Vanessa stared at the screen. He hadn't just beaten her. He had turned her hate into something beautiful. He had taken the ugliest moment of her life and used it to fuel a legacy of inclusion. She looked up from her phone. The bus was passing JFK Airport. She could see the planes taking off in the distance, silver birds soaring into the clouds, heading to Paris, Tokyo, Zurich. She would never be on one of them again. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had spent her life believing she was above others, literally and metaphorically. She had believed that her comfort was worth more than another family's dignity. Now, she was grounded. Permanently. Vanessa Van Doren leaned her head against the cold, vibrating window of the city bus and watched the planes fly away, knowing finally and painfully that the man in seat 1A had been right all along. Money didn't buy class. But karma was free, and it had finally arrived. And that is the story of how one woman's entitlement collided with the wrong passenger at 35,000 feet. It's a harsh reminder that you never truly know who you're talking to. Vanessa judged a book by its cover, or in this case a tracksuit, and she paid the ultimate price for it. She thought she could bully her way to the front, but she forgot that true power doesn't need to scream. True power sits quietly, eats its meal, and lets the system do the work. Davies Montgomery didn't need to yell. He just needed to be himself. So the next time you're at the airport, or a restaurant, or anywhere really, be kind. You never know if the person you're being rude to is the one who owns the building. What do you think? Did Vanessa deserve the lifetime ban and the divorce, or was the punishment too harsh? Have you ever witnessed a Karen moment like this in real life? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next upload. Stay humble, stay kind, and fly safe. I'll see you in the next video.